So what do the critics say about existentialism? Well, Sartre, this lecture is an apology for existentialism. That is, a defense of it against its critics. And what is the most serious criticism, objection to existentialism? It seems to be that if you're an existentialist, then you have no basis for saying what's right and what's wrong, except what people want. That is, there are no values that can be assumed that we could use to evaluate each other's actions. That is, if our actions are more or less arbitrary because there's no human nature, there's no God, there are no values to guide us, then on what basis could we possibly object to anyone doing anything? That is, it would seem that everything's relative, and maybe it is. Sartre seems not to think that, and I guess I'm a little puzzled by some of the points that he makes in response to this. For instance, he mentions Kant, the philosopher Kant, a number of times, and one of the really essential things about Kantian moral philosophy is that Kant thought that to be moral, when we act, we should act as if we are legislating for all mankind, for all human beings. So that whatever we do, we should feel comfortable with the rest of the world doing the same in a similar situation. Otherwise, our actions couldn't be moral. Sartre more or less adopts this when he says that we should, we part of our anguish, he talks about towards the beginning of the essay, is a result of our knowing this, that we're legislating for all mankind, and that we have to take into account all mankind when we make our decisions in life, yet not having any kind of guide to do so. I'm not quite sure how much I agree with that, or how much I see that as being coherent or following from his premises, because if he really does believe the supposed Dostoevsky quote that if God did not exist, everything would be permitted, I wonder how you can condemn anybody for doing anything if you believe that. He goes through a lot of twists and turns in this, and one of the things to keep in mind, and there's no reason to get bogged down in, is that it's a French intellectual writing something, lecturing on something in 1946, so highly charged political atmosphere, and pretty much at that time to be a leftist, or to be an intellectual in France, and to a certain extent in America and everywhere too, was everybody kind of expected you to be a communist, because that was the only progressive and fair and just wave of the future. So a lot of it is enmeshed in intellectual discussion and politics of a different time. However, it is an honest question. If you don't believe in anything, then aren't you just a nihilist? Somebody who just believes nothing is real, nothing is true, nothing is important? Sartre says no. First of all, he several times says that existentialism is an optimistic type of philosophy, because he says, recognizes that we are subjects, living, conscious beings, not objects, things. And that in being a humanism, it elevates the human being rather than denigrates the human being. But he's still got the problem of, what values are left? On what basis would we either decide how to live, how to resolve any particular situation, or respond to the actions of others which we may disapprove of? Is there any value left? Is there any guide left? Well, Sartre says there's no human nature that's universal. But at the bottom of page 13, he says there is something called the universality of the human condition. He says at the bottom of page 13, furthermore, although it is impossible to find in each and every man a universal essence that can be called human nature, there is nevertheless a human universality of condition. That is, we are all in the same spot, you might say. All of us, all we human beings. That is, we may not have a nature that in some way or another we all share, or that is given to us in some way that can tell us how to live. But we're all in the same spot. Well, we're all in the same condition. We're all in the same circumstances. And what is that? That we have to make choices. and that those choices are free choices. So in a way, you could say, well, that means there's no way that you can go wrong at whatever you choose. If you know, it's your choice, and so there's no basis for condemning you or for supporting you. Whatever you do, you just do. For Sartre, that's not quite true. He says on page 17 that you can pronounce moral judgments. He says at the top of that page, furthermore, I can pronounce a moral judgment. Yeah, well, how? On the basis of what? If you've taken away all these pre-existing values and foundations for making judgments like that. He continues, for I declare that freedom, in respect of concrete circumstances, can have no other end and aim but itself. And when once a man has seen that values depend upon himself, in that state of forsakenness, he can will only one thing, and that is freedom as the foundation of all values. Which is to say, and he, I guess, expands on this in other works, we can do things, maybe we don't do things that are strictly speaking moral and immoral, but we do things that are in good faith, and we do things that are in bad faith. Things that are in good faith are when we make decisions knowing that we're responsible for those decisions and committing ourselves to those decisions and the consequences. Bad faith is when we deceive ourselves. We live a life of self-deception. So freedom as the foundation of all values? Well, perhaps. So perhaps Sartre, although he denies the idea of human nature as being any kind of guide, although he denies there is a God that would be a transcendent reality that we would have to deal with, as in Kierkegaard, he seems to give us, maybe perhaps through the back door, some notion of how he thinks we should go about figuring out how to live, and that is the realization of our freedom. If human beings are freedom, then they are meant to live in at least one way, and that is free, to realize their freedom, to take responsibility, therefore, for their actions, and to commit themselves to their actions. So, you may not be good or bad, but you can be free or unfree in your life. And your realization that you are a free being and acting accordingly seems to be the very foundation of any sort of meaningful life. Of course, this does leave open the question exactly what you're committed to or what you do once you realize your freedom, because of course there's no guarantee of what you will, how you will act in a free way. So whether or not Sartre has actually successfully responded to this criticism, well, that's really for you to decide.